Hello and welcome to the Memory Card. Today, we're going to be finishing our retrospective of the TimeSplitters franchise with the final game in the series, TimeSplitters Future Perfect for the Nintendo GameCube.
The year is 2401. Humankind finds itself locked in a mortal struggle with the TimeSplitters, an evil race of creatures bent on the destruction of the entire human race. Using the power of the time crystals, they travel through our history, pushing humanity to the very brink of extinction. With resistance weakening, our last hope lies with a small ship speeding towards Earth. On board are 9 stolen time crystals, intended to power the time machine constructed by Earth's finest scientists. The plan? To travel back in time, find the source of the time crystals, and destroy them all, ending the war before it ever began.
TimeSplitters Future Perfect was released in 2005 for the GameCube, PlayStation 2, and the original Xbox. We're actually just past the 12th anniversary of this game's release, and wow, that makes me feel old. I remember being so excited for this game before it came out, because of how much I loved the first 2 games in the series. This game was released towards the tail end of the 6th generation of consoles, and the graphics and gameplay certainly reflect that. The visuals are the best of the franchise, and by this point, the gameplay had been polished to a gleam. In a lot of ways, this game represents the end of an era for me. Not only for probably my favorite generation of consoles, but for games like this in general. At the time, there were certainly an oversaturation of World War II shooters and licensed games based on movies, and they were mostly mediocre at best with a few exceptions. In some ways, I wish the AAA game publishers would go back to making games that had less ridiculous budgets, so they could take more risks and make more interesting games and give us more variety as a result instead of just yearly Call of Duty and Assassin's Creed games. Although, that could just be my nostalgia talking here. TimeSplitters Future Perfect was still developed by those mad geniuses over at Free Radical Design, just like the rest of the series, but now it is being published by EA, which ultimately was a double-edged sword. EA publishing this game meant that they had the financial backing to make this the best entry in the series with the strongest story mode and the largest character roster with around 150 playable characters. Though this game received great reviews, as well it should, TimeSplitters Future Perfect did not get the sales figures that EA wanted, which meant that EA would not greenlight a sequel, and unfortunately, this is pretty par for the course for games published by EA.
What the? Any chance of a hand?
I say, what are you doing way out here, old chap?
I'm supposed to be on that island.
Are you sure, Bean? This whole area's about to be bombed to Kingdom Come.
By who?
Well, by the Navy, of course.
Damn it.
Don't worry, old boy. We've a while yet. There's someone I have to find on the island first. Those Navy chaps won't attack until they get my signal. But what? That was my best pipe, you bounders! No, don't!
Get down.
Good shot, old man.
I don't think much of this weapon.
But I'm afraid you've let the cat out of the bag now.
Why? What's going on?
That flare was the signal. It's going to get a bit hairy from here on.
Damn it. All right, look. If you can get us to shore without getting us killed, I'll help you find your friends. Okay?
Good show, sir. Consider it done.
As I've said in the previous TimeSplitters videos, the story of Future Perfect is the most fleshed out of the franchise. One of the main differences in this story mode is that the first player controls Sergeant Cortez for the duration of the game. Due to that, they were able to flesh out Cortez a lot more in this game, give him some more personality rather than just being a stock Vin Diesel character. Cortez is actually pretty funny in this game and is somewhat portrayed as a lovable dumb guy, although he isn't too dumb. He's just a bit short-sighted and impulsive. However, it never keeps him from being endearing, and he is part of what makes Future Perfect the funniest entry in the series. The progression of humor in the TimeSplitters series is actually pretty similar to the original Evil Dead movies. Though I wouldn't say Future Perfect is quite as goofy as Army of Darkness, but both of those entries are my favorite in their respective franchises, so that's something, I guess. The story in Future Perfect takes place not long after the end of TimeSplitters 2, and it follows Sergeant Cortez as he takes the time crystals he got from the previous game and takes them from the TimeSplitters home base to his home base. After a first level that has a lot of loving homages to the movie Aliens, Cortez's boss sends him back in time to prevent the war with the TimeSplitters from ever happening. This story mode takes him from Scotland in the 1920s to Cold War spy thriller in Soviet Russia, and a zombie-infested American mansion in the 1990s. Now, all these levels are pretty early on, and they're some of my favorites in the entire franchise. Getting to sneak around an outpost with Harry Tipper kind of feels more like a slightly mature version of Austin Powers, which helps since his character was kind of already that to begin with. The Zombie Mansion is a great parody of 90s horror movies and teen slasher movies in general. And it throws in some other strange references, like an NPC that's kind of based off of Ozzy Osbourne, and he feeds a giant zombie monster with a deer skull head and 3 arms like a pet. Just kind of weird. The story of this game is packed with parodies of different genre tropes of different movies and shows and stuff like that, all across media. And it helps make this my favorite story mode in the first-person shooter, just because it's so funny and I love the level design. Something else I appreciate is that the story mode is a bit less difficult in TimeSplitters 2, because those later levels were just cruel. And also, I love how the recurring characters like Harry Tipper and Captain Ash continue to change and get fleshed out through each entry in the series. The multiplayer of TimeSplitters Future Perfect is just as fun as the previous entries, and in a lot of ways it's actually better. My only complaint with the multiplayer this time around is that it's missing 3 modes in the multiplayer: Leech, Flame Tag, and Regeneration to be specific. Now, to be fair, Flame Tag was the only one of those I actually played much, but regardless, it does suck having fewer game modes. And what makes that omission of modes even weirder is that in other ways, the multiplayer is much more fleshed out, because there's so many more playable characters and maps. So in some ways, this is the strongest, most robust multiplayer in the entire franchise, and yet it's still a little anemic because of those missing modes. The Challenge and Arcade League modes return in this entry, and are just as fun as they were in TimeSplitters 2, although it might just be me, but it feels like they're much harder this time around. But aside from that, there's a lot more variety in those modes in Future Perfect, considering that this game has a series of challenges where you control Kalos' robot cat, the main antagonist to Harry Tipper. Not the cat, I'm talking about Kalos, although it would be kind of funny if Harry Tipper spent all this time trying to fight a cat. And I couldn't imagine a mode like that being in a modern first-person shooter, even the really good ones like Overwatch and the new Doom. Throughout this whole game, it felt like the developers had a blast making this game. From the goofy places they took the story, to the weird new characters added in the multiplayer, like a T-Rex, a fish in a robot suit, a gingerbread man, snowman on a flying carpet, cactus man, just weird entries that are really cool. And when a game was made by people that loved what they were making and obviously enjoyed themselves as they made it, it just makes the game that much more likable and special to me. But how fun these games are kind of makes me sad, because chances are we'll never see a sequel to the series, let alone an HD remaster. Nowadays, series like Call of Duty and Battlefield are the standard, which, to me, is to the detriment of the genre. TimeSplitters Future Perfect is still my all-time favorite first-person shooter, and it was a blast to go back and play the entire franchise to record the gameplay footage for these reviews and retrospectives. Although, to be fair, I would be playing them anyway because I love this series, as I hope I made clear throughout these videos. And I hope that one day EA will either release a HD remaster of the trilogy on modern systems, or that they'll do a TimeSplitters 4, although that seems very unlikely considering how risk-adverse EA is, especially nowadays. Regardless, I hope that you enjoyed this retrospective of the series, and hope that you'll join me on future installments of the memory card. Thanks for watching.